Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Marc and Gabby show on Welcome to the Cause. This is episode number 1. Hello, Gabby.
Welcome.
This is so exciting. We're going to have so much fun, and we are going to affect the world. So let's talk a little bit about our cause and our mission in life.
So my cause is to change that wealth and inequality gap within my community. I want to see wealth grow exponentially and change lives.
Yes. We want all lives to change, and we've got some stats for you to go over today. We're going to be super transparent. We're going to bring the data, bring the heat, and then we're going to talk about how we fix the world and change the world. And we want all people to make more money. We want all people to build more wealth, but we're going to share some stats today that are fairly stark.
Yeah. As we were looking, we were like, wow, is that really true?
Our research assistant Siri helped us with this today. So let's jump in. The first thing we're going to talk about is net worth. And the definition for net worth is simply all the things you own, your assets, minus anything you owe, your liabilities. So when we talk about net worth in America, we broke down the median net worth of all types of groups, right?
We did.
And as we do this, we're going to go deeper into single parent households, single moms, single dads, all the different things. But for today, we've got 4 major categories.
Okay.
What are those 4 categories for us?
We have Black, Hispanic, White, and Asian.
Yes. So the big 4, right? The biggest 4. And if you're interested, you ever want to know about a separate community, something different than that, we do have the data and the research to help you there as well. But we took the big 4, which will touch the most lives. So let's start with Black America net worth. You ready? The average household, the median, so this is right in the middle, half above, half below. The median net worth for the typical Black family in America is $44,600. So if you're taking notes down, we're going to draw some correlations, some cause and effect today. So $44,600 for the typical Black family, and then the typical Hispanic family net worth is
$62,000.
So a little bit of an increase. We've got what is that math for me? 18,000 more.
You're better than me at that.
It's close. It's actually
You're the economical guy.
17,400. So without the calculator, but all right. So now watch this jump. You ready? The typical white family in America net worth is
$285,000.
So we're going to talk about this, and we're going to have open, honest, transparent conversations, and how we can maybe narrow that wealth gap, right?
Absolutely.
Now, this might this was the most surprised I was at all the research that we did, and that is the typical Asian family net worth is
$536,000.
So that is more than double? That's almost double of the typical white family. So again, recap really quick: 44,000, 62,000, 285,000, 536,000. So when you're thinking about these numbers and the typical families from different races, we have to start asking the question: well, is there cause and effect? Now, we know this country, we have a history where there's been systemic things that have happened.
Right.
And what we want to do is we want to break through that. We live in a world today, I believe it is the easiest it has ever been, regardless of your skin color, regardless of how you identify in gender, that if you do the work, especially in our industry,
right,
you will build wealth. And we know people who make millions of dollars every year in the industry that we're in from all different races.
Yeah, right? I do agree. I think it correlates back to your spending habits, right?
I think there's a lot of things that come into play today. Your culture, upbringings, 2-parent households, a lot of those things we're going to talk about. So let's give you some more stats as we go here. Home ownership, the percentage of Black families that own a home in America is
44%.
The only group that was below 50%. Now, we are in real estate. We love real estate. We own investment real estate. We believe in that. We teach that. And so what we're finding is more Black families rent than own. And just to bury the lead a little bit, more Asian families invest in real estate than any other. So there's going to be maybe some cause and effect in this conversation, but we believe home ownership is on the path to building wealth. So we want to help more Black families own more homes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll go through the stats and we'll come back and talk cause and effect. Hispanic families home ownership is
51%.
51%. So more than half of Hispanic families in America own a home, but about half rent, right? Same kind of conversation. So the percentage of white families in America who own a home,
72%.
72%, like 72.7%. So
Right.
almost 73%. And we're going to talk about that for a second here in a little bit. And then Asian families, percentage that own a home,
62%.
62%, almost 63%. So let's talk about this for a second.
Okay.
We know in our industry, when you go to real estate school, you study things like redlining, you study things like steering clients and how these things are forbidden. And there's a good reason for that, because there used to be laws on the books
Right.
that, Black families couldn't live in these areas or only white families in these areas. We all know that existed in the past, right?
True. In the past. But I look at Atlanta and I look at the average price point of a home. We have this circle perimeter in the city of Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
And we call it 285.
Okay.
Beneath the middle of 285, the average home price is almost $200,000 less than what it is for the same house north of 285.
Yep.
And so as much as we like to say some of this stuff has gone away,
yeah, it's still kind of there. It's still, it's so in a lot of communities, and I sold a lot of foreclosures. So I saw a lot of this. I grew up in some really rough areas. If you know my story, I grew up in abject poverty. So places like Detroit, Michigan, places like Kansas City, Missouri, kind of inner city type of places. And so you do see the lighted areas. You do see some of those things. And so, but we also have things that we're still talking to our politicians about, like mortgage approval rates and some other things. But we're going to go deeper than that today, because I want to believe, and you have to check me on this, because I want to believe that we live in a world where we all love each other and that we're going to get past any kind of systemic things on play. Because today it is illegal and forbidden to have any kind of discrimination based on race. So there shouldn't be any systemic racism today. Does that mean there's not?
it definitely still is.
There definitely
And-
still is, yeah.
And we still have to figure out how to push the needle forward.
Yeah. And so, people are people, and yet there's probably problems in all groups that we'll get to. But at the end of the day, here are the stats, here are the numbers, and we've got to address this. We believe the ladder goes like this. Net worth comes from home ownership, comes from financial acumen and education. So when you think about that, if we started with financial education and acumen, we could raise people up and help elevate everybody.
Yesterday we were sitting at the dinner table with your babies, your grown babies.
Yeah. 17 and 20.
And your daughter, she's in high school, and she said the fact that they're bringing credit card companies or teaching them about that,
Yeah.
even if it's not correct.
Yeah.
Let's be clear, because she called them out on not being the best at educating them on finances. The fact that they actually did that inside of the school.
Yeah. Her high school was teaching her class how to fill out credit card applications, and my daughter, more is caught than taught. And so my daughter texted my mom, or her mom, and said, I don't think this is right. I don't think we should be teaching kids how to fill out credit applications. I was very proud of her.
And so we talk about how is wealth shown within each community.
Yeah.
And I don't know about every other community, but in the Black community, wealth is taught as being shown, right? So it is the driving of the nicest car. It is wearing Louis Vuitton, Gucci.
Yeah.
That person who does that, they are the wealthiest / what we view as probably the happiest.
Yeah.
And yesterday you brought up an interesting conversation, and I'm going a little bit off bar,
That's okay.
but that does not equate to happiness in real life,
It
right?
really doesn't. And we have all the studies that show it. But to your point, that's how you flex. It's you gotta have a nice
Flex?
car. Oh yeah, that's you flex.
Word, okay.
Oh, are you kidding? So I've had 39 cars in my life, because inside of me is still that 7-year-old little boy who is never going to be good enough. We can't afford that. We're broke people. Rich people are terrible. They're greedy. They're bad. I'm Southern Baptist. Are you Southern Baptist?
I am.
Yeah. So you're talking to two Southern Baptists here, which by the way, church plays a big role in how we end up looking at our money, because I come from a long line of broke churchgoers.
That's good,
And
Mark.
we're taught that if you have excess money, you are to give it to the church, because they're smarter at investing it or spending it or doing God's work than you are. So, but I will tell you, I've been to several mostly Black churches, and it's even more so in Black Southern Baptist churches. It is, you are to help one another, help your family, and give your money to the church.
And rich people are bad.
Rich people are bad people. They must be stealing to get it. They must be doing all those things. So you brought up something that's a perfect segue into our next conversation. And that is, especially in the Black community, as you say, you show off your wealth, right? It's for show. So you see more things like big jewelry, you see cars, you see whatever the case is. That's more predominant in the Black community than any of the others. Would you agree?
I agree. And I think that's what you talk about. What is the term you use? We took for the kids. You show them better.
More is caught than taught.
More is caught than taught.
That's right. Yeah.
Growing up, my grandma was not flashy, but she owned a home that I saw her pay off in 8 years. She didn't wear a whole bunch of designer. As a matter of fact, we would go to Macy's and shop on clearance at the bottom rack. I'm like, you have so much money. And she would be like, I want to keep my money too, But she also enjoyed life. She was happy. I didn't see friction between she and my granddad. And I'm sure things happened, but it wasn't any stress from money. And they still had things happen with money.
Grandma Dorothy. I got to meet Grandma Dorothy on FaceTime, and what a sweetheart. My goodness, you can just tell she loves you so much. Yeah. You are her whole heart, as you say. That was so sweet. But yes, what I love about Gabby is every time we have a financial conversation for her, she calls Grandma to make sure I'm telling her the truth. And Grandma so far has backed me up.
She has backed him up, and I'm like, why didn't you teach me this? Because you taught me everything else about life and money, but you didn't tell me that. And she was like, I have. I just called it something different. And so
that's a good segue real quick. Good point is that there is a different language around money per community. So let's talk about that a little bit. It's fair to say that if you think about 90% of the stock market is owned by 10% of the people. Those 10% are the wealthiest. So when you break down these groups, if you think about if one group is the wealthiest and 90% of the stocks are owned by the top 10% wealthy people, then by mathematical default, more of the stocks are going to be owned by that group of people. Fair?
Fair.
That group of people in this conversation happens to be mostly white men, and mostly white men run financial institutions, and mostly white men have come up with the financial lingo. So when you taught me this, because I'm sitting there having a high level conversation about high level finance and personal finance and how to build wealth and do those things. And you said to me, Mark, I need you to slow down. I need you to interpret that for me to understand it. And so from that perspective, that was a big aha for me, is that we may have to have deeper conversations about interpreting different conversations.
True. And, one of the things Mark was talking to me about, did I know what a gross mutual stock fund? The crazy part is I had one.
Gross stock mutual fund.
Gross stock mutual fund.
We're learning. I love it.
The crazy part is, guys, I actually already had one.
You had one. And you didn't know what it was called. And I
had no idea what it was called.
Yeah.
And so I called my financial advisor and I'm like, hey, I want to set this up. He's like, you have one. You just haven't been putting any money in it. I'm like, oh. And he went on to explain it, but because I had spoken to you, I had a really good understanding of what it was.
Well, and let's have this conversation. We need more people who look like the people who look up to them look. I know this is a lot of looks, but let me just say it this way. We need more Hispanic financial advisors who are successful to help people who are Hispanic, because Hispanics will tend to trust people who look like them. People tend to listen to people who look like them. And we all need to be trustworthy of each other. And at the same time, the reason we want to promote so many people, and again, we have friends we're going to bring on this podcast from every community who are killing it financially. And we're going to break through a lot of barriers, but we need more people who look like you to inspire people who look like you to want to be like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to income. because I want to go back to cause and effect, and I think we're starting to build a pattern here. So remember, it's home ownership, but it's also going to be income. So here we go. So the income for the average Black family in America, the median income, sorry, for the average, the typical Black family is
$56,490.
$56,490. Now, let's just stop there for a second. When you see eggs going to $12 a dozen or whatever, you're paying $1 an egg. Are you kidding me? When you see bread go to $8 a loaf, this is real inflation.
Well, let's not only talk about that. What if I'm a single parent and I have multiple children?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know how we do it, because we pay how much for childcare today?
You don't even want to know.
I don't want to know, but I know it's a lot.
I paid $2,000 for my son and my daughter because childcare is so unaffordable. She stays with her grandma. And that's a privilege that I recognize, because I can take out that expense because my mother-in-law is so supportive.
Yeah. So, okay. So you've got, so you have one child, $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
So let's just break this down. By the way, that's after tax.
And let me be clear, that does not include activities to provide for those.
This is, no,
that's just base, right?
But this is childcare. And by the way, this is going to tie into our later conversation about two-parent households. But if you have a child in childcare that costs you $2,000 a month, $24,000, and your household income is $56,000, it is going to be very hard, if not impossible, for you to build wealth. It's probably why we start to see some of these things. It's also why we see, typical families will have, like you kind of have, you'll have parents or grandparents or, step parents or in-laws or whoever that'll jump in and help, because at $2,000, I'd pay grandma $1,000 a month and save $1,000, right? So there's some opportunities there. All right, the typical Hispanic family, median income in America,
$65,540.
65,000. So again, we should do the percentage on that. But the difference in Hispanic income and Black income is almost the exact same gap as the difference between Hispanic home ownership and Black home ownership, and almost the exact same difference in the gap of Hispanic net worth and Black family net worth. So there might be cause and effect there, more income, because here's what I'm going to tell you. More income does not equal net worth as long as you're over a certain threshold. That threshold's about $80,000 a year. So step number one, we already know we've got to get Black and Hispanic families up above that $80,000 number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then questions that come from that, and we're going to go to the other one.
Yep.
How do we do that?
But there's never been a better time to do that than today, in my opinion. I have a friend, happens to be a Black person, who started, and I had a long conversation with him, and he really wanted to increase his income. And he bought a power washer,
Mm-hmm.
and then put some flyers together. I know that you hip new social media cats don't think flyers are cool. You're like social assets or whatever, what you call them. But he literally put paper flyers together, went door to door, basically, put them in mailboxes, did whatever. And he got his income to $100,000 a year. And he's working less than he was at his last job, because he's just power washing. He's doing things that other people don't want to do. He has a power washer. I think he paid $500 at Home Depot for. Mm-hmm. Made $100,000 power washing.
Well, I told you this when I was 19, 20 years old. I was making six figures, but I had accumulated so much debt that sometimes it's as simple as you need another job. And it shouldn't be that you have
not forever.
But sometimes you just have to make that sacrifice. One of my friends said, well, I have kids and you were young when you did that. I'm like, get an online job. Do a call center that you can do from home. There are so many other options today, work from home options, that weren't available when I had to do what I had to do.
Yep. Well, I want to point out too that you were in a situation, you were 19 years old. You didn't have a college degree yet, and you were making $100,000. Right. The fact that you had student loans is irrelevant to the fact that you were able to go out and make $100,000 a year. So I love that story. Let's go to the income for the typical white family in America. The median is
$89,050.
Okay, so this is the first time we see a clue where the income is $89,000 versus, say, $65,000 for Hispanic families. It's more, and it's a lot more as a percentage. It's not the same gap we see in net worth. So we're going to start to break down why we think these things are showing up the way that they're showing up. So that's the conversation there. And then the typical Asian household,
$112,800.
big jump again. So is it any wonder that the Asian households make more money, that they end up with net worth? It would be simple if we just said that, but here, we're going to make some different arguments today, because what we know, all the studies show, once you get over that $80,000, $100,000 mark,
Yeah.
the amount of money you make doesn't necessarily correlate anymore with how much wealth you build. And this is what people don't want to believe is. People want to say, I want to make more money. But we will show you study after study that shows the more money you make, the more debt you go into. The more money you make, the more money you waste. The more money you make, there's a lot of things that happen. There's only a 30% correlation between income and net worth. And this is fascinating. Do you know a bigger determiner of your wealth than your income is who you marry? Who you marry. That's so it matters who you marry. Second thing that matters is what kind of car you drive. So Gabby, come on. We're going to talk. We're going to open all of our kimonos in this channel. We're going to talk about what kind of car do you drive, Gabby?
I drive a 2022 Porsche Cayenne that I got brand new.
Mm-hmm.
My best year in real estate. I decided, I think that year I probably had like 800,000 GCI almost. And I was like, I'm going to go buy a Porsche cash.
You fell into the flex trap.
And I'm going to do Section 179.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be able to write it all off.
Mm-hmm. My accountant told me go get a 6,000 pound car.
Yep. I did it all.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to this year, that was about $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
I was without a car for a full month.
The engine blew up in it.
I was without the car for a full month because the engine failed me. Yeah, and that was a $60,000 bill. Thankfully, Porsche did cover it for me, but that was pretty crazy.
We
that it was a 2-year-old brand new car.
We need to add to this study what the typical household per race drives.
Okay.
That'll be interesting to see. I know that, for instance, because I know that white men are marketed to for luxury cars more than any other product. Like, so we study some of these socio-demographics, and at the end of the day, you're going to see like high-end Lexus, for example. You're going to see, most millionaires don't drive Mercedes, BMW like you think they would. Study Dr. Thomas Stanley if you haven't. Millionaire Next Door, Millionaire Mind, those books. But as we go into this, let's go a little bit deeper, because so far all we've proven is that the more money you make, the more wealth you build. But the highlight of this conversation is the average Asian family makes twice what the average Black family makes, and yet their net worth is, do the math in my head, 13 or 14 times higher.
Yes.
So let's break this down, and we're going to add some facts as we build this program over time that are going to show familial patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to see the divorce rate in the Asian community is way less than the Black community or the Hispanic community or the white community. You're going to see more families stay intact. You're going to see more fathers in the household. You're going to see a lot of things that may not be the leading cause, but are contributors to why we see the numbers that we see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what gets it. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so in your mind, you are a Black female.
I am.
I am a white man.
I am.
We have our own perspective, our own biases, our own outlook on life, all these things, right? You always look at me funny when I say, I know Mark. I know I am. But I want you to give us your perspective as a younger, very successful, entrepreneurial Black female of why do these numbers show up the way they show up?
I go back to college for me. My minor was sociology in college. And I remember sitting in a class, again, I say this all the time, growing up, I never experienced any type of racism or socioeconomic. We had classism, but I grew up in Atlanta in an all Black environment. So I never experienced racism. My doctors were Black, my teachers were all Black. Like, I never saw anything outside of that world. And when I got to college, I grew up in a single parent household. When I got to college, they were like, there's something wrong with making this amount of money, and there's something wrong with growing up in a single parent household.
Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have been able to do that statistically.
And I was like, no, it's not. Look at me. I grew up in a single, and I'm perfect. No, I'm not. Not even close. But I didn't know that they weren't necessarily saying something was wrong, but economically.
Yeah. You were the outlier for sure.
And I had no idea. I'm like, I only saw majority single parent households, and a lot of the married families that I saw were extremely toxic.
Yeah.
And their kids would come to our house for refuge.
Mhm.
Like my mom was like the big mama. They would all be at our house. We would eat ramen noodles together, McDonald's together, So I didn't even know that it was something wrong with that. And
Yeah.
so having kids and seeing the perspective of how important it is to have a father, I still didn't think anything was wrong with it
Right.
until I went to see a therapist
Mhm.
and I started understanding a little bit more about myself and my upbringing. And I got married. I'm like, oh, like this is what it's like
Yeah.
to have a dad where kids need.
You're
That
married to an amazing man who's a great father who you were telling me a story I'm telling you, but when your son is how old?
He is 6.
Okay. So when your son gets out of line or he's getting reprimanded, what happens to you inside?
I crumble. I want to cry.
Yeah. And then when Jay steps in and does a little scolding or whatever he's doing,
Discipline. Mhm.
yeah, then how do you feel?
Yeah,
I know you take Zane's side.
that's my baby.
So for all of you out there, and as a stepdad, this is even more pronounced. I will tell you, as parents, you got to get on the same page, so that both of you, because over time, remember, I believe our job is not to raise good kids; it's to raise amazing adults.
Yes.
And so the challenge is, if you are the compassionate, loving, empathetic, and I know you are. And I talking to Dorothy last night, I'm like, oh man, this is my grandma. This is every grandma I've ever met in my life. They're the most loving, adoring people. And I can't imagine that lady ever scolding you, ever reprimanding you, ever disciplining you, all those things. And I'm going to argue that when we get out of line as kids, we need a little bit of that.
Yes.
So unfortunately, that tends to come from the dad.
Yep.
And I grew up in a household where my dad was a mess. He was alcoholic. Never had a job. My parents were constantly fighting. It was a highly volatile, emotional day to day. We were broke all the time, lived in a car, did all those things. So I didn't have a good role model as a dad. My grandfather became my role model. He's Christian. He's the reason I'm a Christian. He had a job all the time, took care of his family, most loving man I ever met. But he could, with a look, put you in check.
Listen,
I mean, you don't mess with grandpa.
it's so crazy because when Jason is going out of town for work and I say something to the kids, I realize how much I have to scream to tell them don't do that. Literally, Jay can just look at them and they'll stop. I'm like, why are y'all not like that with me?
Pay attention. Pay attention to those patterns. So we're going to do a full episode, by the way, on single and dual parent households. And we're going to break it down by all categories as well. So let's shift gears a little bit as we kind of wrap up for today. And I want to talk a little bit from my perspective going through the last several years since the George Floyd murder specifically. I want to talk about all things that I've witnessed, seen, led through. I led the largest real estate company in the world through a time where there was a lot of racial divide. There was a lot of conversations that needed to be had that hadn't been had, and there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah. And to your point, because of leaders like you, I ended up being able to have the first minority-owned office in my region.
I knew you were going to bring that up. You know why you brought that up? Because you also happen to be the fastest growing brokerage in America right now. So yeah, that's pretty good. I like that.
And we talk about just having great leaders, but also with me being so young, I'm not naive to know that I have to figure out how to bridge that gap in knowledge for me, right? And so I think some of it is things like this podcast are extremely important for agents to jump on, or for anybody in the world to jump on, right? Not just real estate agents, because you need somebody to help bridge that knowledge gap and welcome you to their cause. I wouldn't be able to know half of the things I know if I wasn't coached by you, right? Because at my level of leadership, it's more about understanding how to create more wealth determiners for their families.
That's right. And so as I was leading through this, and I really, I had a big struggle. I have a big heart, I believe. I love people. I love everybody. I want everyone to win at the highest level. And by the way, I know what it sounds like when a white person says, my best friend is black and my best friend is black. And so I grew up with him. We played football together. He went on to play for the Broncos. I did not. He was super talented. And so I called him one day and I said, I need some, his nickname's Tank because he was a fullback. He's a monster. And I said, Tank, I need some help. I love everybody, and yet I don't know how to handle this. I'm hearing things like white privilege and things that I don't agree with myself, and I want to go up and fight about it.
Yeah.
And I want to be defensive. And he said the words that helped me through it. And he said, Mark, what you don't understand is when you walk into a bank, people think you work there, you own it. I can walk into a bank and people don't think that about me.
Oh, can I pause?
For the first time, I was like, I kind of get it. I got goosebumps today just telling the story.
Just to add to that, people always ask me why I kept the Maddox. Maddox turned into my middle. When I would go deposit my checks, I would almost get stood up to verify. Like right now, I have my hair done, but normally I'm a mom rushing out the house, getting the kids, and I'll have on sweats and a t-shirt. I'm just trying to make it out of the house. When I go to the bank to get my money out, my family will tell you I have horror stories of me crying because the bank refuses or thinks I'm fraud. I have filed so many complaints because I'm like, why do you not think I'm myself? So I kept my maiden name just because I'm scared of going to the bank and saying Maddox is nowhere in there.
Your maiden name means something in Atlanta. Right. So, okay. Love that. So that's interesting because I would argue I've had some experiences where I've shown up with my hat on backwards, and both of us made a lot more money than the average person makes. So when you go and deposit a $40,000-$50,000 check, that's not normal.
Right.
And so I felt some of that scrutiny too, but never to that extent. Like never. They might have me show my driver's license and look me over and whatever, but like, how do you make this kind of money? But at the end of the day, I'm sure you get it a lot worse.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so bad to where sometimes if we're driving, my best friend, just like you, I grew up Black, Southern Baptist. My best friend is white and atheist. He's gay. And he's my entire world. He'll say, Gabby, if we ever get pulled over, we probably need to switch seats. And I'm like, the fact that you recognize that it is
he's looking out for you
is pretty baffling.
Yeah.
Because I didn't recognize it.
Yeah. Is it getting better?
I think to your point, we do have more opportunities. I also think people just have to recognize, what do you call it? Abject poverty?
Poverty, yeah.
It's a lot harder for, I believe, a Black male to get out of that than white.
I would agree with that. I think there's a couple things. One is it's time on task over time. And one of the things I'm defensive about privately that I don't share publicly until now is I know how hard I work. I know how there was a post on Facebook when I became president of Telegrams, and someone said, "Oh, here we go again, another white man. You tell me there's no Black females that can do this job." And by the way, it's a fair comment. And at the time, what I wanted to respond with, and I didn't, was, you don't know my resume. You don't have 20 years of working 100-hour weeks and bust my butt, being #1 agent in my market, being a #1 team leader in the company, being #1 regional director. Like I worked my ass off to get to that point, and then all of a sudden felt this wave of guilt that I happened to be a white man in my mid-40s at the time, and my dream job comes available, and my first reaction, instead of elation and super excited, let's go change the world, let's grow the largest real estate company the world has ever seen, like we did, 177,377 agents, not that we're keeping count. But at the end of the day, there was truth in the comment, but it really hurt.
Well, can I tell you something?
Sure.
I forgive you.
Thank you.
You have done nothing wrong but help me, help my community. And I don't think that's a burden for you to ever carry.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is admitting that there is a problem. Yeah. And a lot of people, including Black people, we fail to realize, again, I was the person saying, like, there's nothing wrong with growing up in a single parent household.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I got married and I'm like, oh, like I wouldn't have my mother-in-law to keep my daughter if I was not married. That's right. Like, my mother-in-law keeps my baby that saves me from paying $4,000 a month from school You know,
Jason, she just said the only reason she married you is because your mom would watch her kid. Wait a
and the
second.
good health care. I'm joking, Jay. I'm
He works for the government.
joking.
That's so good.
But
Uh,
yeah, I think we have to start accepting truths.
Yeah.
You know, I was telling the story. We had Dress for Success at our school.
Mhm.
And so they brought in this amazing superintendent at my high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my high school was off of Martin Luther King Drive.
Okay.
And Martin Luther King Drive exists in every neighborhood. And y'all know what happens on Martin Luther King Drive. And I remember them saying, Dress for Success. This will help you guys get jobs and summer internships. And one of my friends said, I said, why didn't you dress up? He said, Gabby, I was trying to feed my sister last night. My mom is on drugs. And so I stayed out selling drugs because that's the only way I don't have to be in an environment at 16 years old.
Yeah.
I don't have the means to drive to and from work, and I got to be able to run back in the house if it's an emergency with my little sister.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's an excuse, but
No.
and then you get into a gang because it's the people out there to protect you
It's the family you run to. Yeah.
because there are no other men that
Yep.
you can go to.
Yep.
And so the big dog is the person you look up to in your community. And so we it's extremes.
Yeah.
And in middle school, I didn't realize or understand abject poverty.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, we have some poor people. No, we have some people who you're saying they can make it out of anything.
Yeah.
My grandma had that conversation. She was like, I can make it out of anything, Gabby. People can make it out of anything. Her mom died right after she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a millionaire now. My grandma, she was one of 12 kids. She was the youngest. I said, Grandma, what does your older sister? She looked at me and she said, my older sister actually dropped out of school so she could take care of me at 12 years old.
Wow.
That's why you have what you have, right? So could it be fair to say your older sister maybe didn't have a true chance?
Right. Yeah. And there's still time, or there was at the time,
Mhm.
right? When your grandmother grew up and left, then we would have had to get out there and do those things. So I think the point that I would make is take a longer term view. It might take you 10 years to get out. It might take you 20 years to get out. It's worth putting in the work to get out. Because what we see happen is if you don't put in the work to get out, you stay in, and staying in doesn't lead anywhere good. We're going to do a whole episode on crime rates and other things, and you're going to see a correlation where the longer you stay in poverty, the more likely you are to end up in jail or dead. We got to stop that.
Well, the other thing is the path of least resistance is always the easiest, right?
Mhm.
You keep saying you have to do the work. The real thing is you're going to have to work 3 times as hard
You might have to.
as the other person because you don't have a family who left you that lineage of wealth. And so you're going to have to work a lot harder
And that's
and accept that.
it's true for everyone at some degree. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
I played high school golf. So here's a super poor kid. My dad was a golf hustler, so he taught me how to play golf early, and I was pretty good at it as a kid. So one of the sports I excelled at, ended up paying for some of my college. But so I'm playing golf in high school, and I have no new equipment. I don't have any clothes that match. All the other kids in the golf team were country club kids. They were wealthy. They were not all of them, several of them were wealthy, and my way to compete was to go beat them on the golf course. Those kids started in a 100-meter race to build wealth. Those kids started 75 meters ahead than me, right? So you're right. In my own little group of male white people, who break it down that way, I was way behind in that race to build wealth. And the funny thing is, I wasn't comparing myself to them. Sure, there was the envy and the normal stuff. I wish I had new golf clubs. I wish I had, the cars they had, or a car in general, and all that stuff. But what I knew was if I worked hard enough that I could end up being wealthy. And from that, and not to pick on anybody, but out of my entire sphere of influence as a kid, I was the one to break out the most. I was the one to build the most amount of wealth. And it's for a couple of reasons. One is I study this stuff like crazy because I have a passion about it. I love it. I love teaching it. I've taught it for 20 plus years. But 2 is I worked my tail off because I started so far behind. You see a lot of really poor people build wealth because once you live in a car, not much scares you. Now, so within, let's say black males,
That's a tweet
let's say,
or
there's
X
some- is that
or thread, one of them. But that needs to be, once you live in a car, nothing scares you.
yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. So let's talk about just black males. When you look at black males, there are black males who start in the worst of worst conditions that make it out and become millionaires. We have lots of those stories for you. And there are people who start 90 meters down a 100-meter race that end up going backwards. It's true of all groups. When we start comparing groups to groups is when we start to see some much bigger disparity. So I don't believe, I want to not believe that there's not a person on the planet that can't get themselves in a position to build wealth if they work hard enough, long enough, and start early enough. That's my belief. And if you're out there and you want to argue that, I want to personally talk to you, and I'm going to come see you, and we're going to get after it, and we're going to build a plan, and we are going to do the things necessary. We live in a gig economy. This is the thing I was to tell you. And I've had so many Uber drivers where I just love these conversations. I'm like, hey, how long have you driven for Uber? It's been a year. Great. How do you like it? Well, it's great. It's my second job. I'm making extra money right now, trying to pay off some debt. And I'm like, man, I'm so proud of you. That is so fantastic. You are doing the extra work. And I was with one guy who's a Hispanic man, and he was telling me, he was walking through his story, and he goes, yeah, I had about $500,000 in debt, and I promised my wife I'd pay it off. I've got 6 kids, I think 6 or 7 kids. And he goes, I've had 3 jobs. I've worked 14, 15 hours a day for 3 years. And he said, next year we will have 0 debt. And I was like, dude, how old are you? 37. And I'm like, you know how wealthy you're going to be? And he's like, I know I can do it. And he's like, if we live in a society where you can drive for Uber, you can deliver pizzas, you can power wash, you can do anything you want to do. You just got to trade that time. We all have the same amount of time in the day. What are you willing to do to go get it?
And that's the thing. We have so much access to information right now, especially for millennials and Gen Zers. So much information and access to information. And the thing that's scary about it, Mark, we believe the people who are flashy, and let me be very clear. I do believe, and Mark can't hear this, that you can spoil yourself. There is nothing wrong with getting you a nice Louis bag if you have made a goal and hit it.
If it's fake, yeah. Just kidding. No, we want you to have nice things.
We want you to have nice things, but not at the expense of going into debt and putting your family in a horrible situation.
It's about priorities.
Because I struggled with that. When I first did become debt free, I struggled with getting nice things for myself because I didn't feel like I deserved it, or I was making a really bad decision. And I think it's just in moderation.
Yeah, my amazing wife, Kristen, had, when we met, she had a store card for every store I've ever heard of and about 10 stores I'd never heard of. And I'm like, what are all these cards? And she had built a habit of going shopping, getting a card, doing the thing. It's really easy in our society to get sucked into that. And then as we went through kind of our courtship, this is older called dating, courting, and she like systematically started paying everything off, cutting everything up. And I'm like, who is this monster that is on this wealth?
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so we've done some amazing things together on personal finance at a personal level. But again, if left to our own devices, I always say this. I always say, if I didn't study this stuff at the rate and teach the way I do, I would have a Lamborghini and live in a trailer park. Like because my priorities are so out of whack. It's hard to get away from who you are and how you grow up. Give us some closing thoughts, my friend.
Oh, today was so amazing. And I think our main priority is just to change that wealth gap and get into real conversations about what it looks like to change our habits.
So if you like this conversation, we're going to do lots more of these podcasts. We have all kinds of masterminds and coaching opportunities and all those fun things. So go to welcometothecause.com and have an amazing day. Thanks, partner.
Thank you.
Won't you take the best of me?